In this lecture, we'll look at a value type that we haven't looked at before. Specifically, we'll look at the value type that lets us store a single character. The data type is called Char, although people call it Char and Char as well. I'll just call it Char. And it uses 16 bits for storage, and the character that it stores is something called a Unicode character. Now, way back in the old days, we only used 8 bits for characters because we were using ASCII, but it turns out it's actually a big wide world out there, and ASCII just isn't big enough to store the character sets that we need to store for sort of global reach for our characters. So we use 16 bits for Unicode characters, and the operations that we use on characters, we'll sort of discover them as we need them, but I will say that regularly what we're doing is we are comparing a character to a character literal or another variable that happens to be holding a character. Let's see how this works in code. This is actually one of the exercises from the previous course, where you got a menu choice from the user and then printed out an appropriate message. The difference is that when you did that exercise, you were getting a menu choice as an integer, and now we're going to get a menu choice as a character. So as before, we print the menu, and now we're going to prompt for and get a choice, and the difference is in how we deal with what they provided. I'm actually going to comment out this piece for a moment and change this to be more simple. So here, I am declaring a variable called choice, and I'm making it the char data type, so this is a single Unicode character, and I'm assigning a value to it. So in this case, no matter what the user types in, I'm going to say they said new game. The interesting thing here is these are single quotes, not double quotes. So a string literal, which we've been using ever since we started printing stuff out using console write line, appears between double quotes, but a character literal appears between single quotes. And you can also see that down below where I'm comparing the value of the variable to N, L, O, and Q. So now that I showed you the simple syntax, I'm going to get rid of that simple syntax and do the more complicated stuff. And this is a chicken and egg problem because I need to talk about strings here, and we haven't talked about strings yet, but we need to talk about characters before we can talk about strings, so just bear with me and hopefully this will get a little more clear when we do the next lecture. But we know that console.readline actually returns a string. And we know that because in the past, we have parsed that string into an integer, for example, when they were doing the menu choice in that exercise in the previous course. So at this point, I'm holding a string of characters. And to simplify my check here, so I don't have to check for both uppercase N and lowercase n, I'm taking the string I got back and I'm making it all uppercase. So now, no matter what they typed in as a string, it is all uppercase. But it's a string right now. It's not actually a single character. And I know that strings are sequences of characters, so I'm going to access the 0th, the first character in the string. And I'll talk about that more in the next lecture, but really we can treat this string as an array of characters, and we already know that we get at the first element in an array by using the index 0, so we get at the first character in a string by using the index 0. Okay, let me run this and show you how it works. So I can actually enter lowercase n here, and because I'm converting to upper, it says it's creating a new game. And I'll run through with all the different choices quickly to show you that they all work fine. And of course, I can enter an invalid choice as well, and it says that's not a valid menu choice. So the key ideas here are that choice holds a single Unicode character, and here's some somewhat complicated processing to get at that from the user input. But once we have it, we can compare that value to character literals, and of course we could compare it to another variable that is of the char data type as well. So character literals, remember, are between single quotes, and that's all we need at this point about the char data type. Before we end this lecture, you should go do an in-video quiz about the char data type. And to recap, in this lecture we learned that we use the char data type to store a single Unicode character.